Accessing the feed now. We're in. But I don't know for how long. You seeing this? Way too much security, even for Advent.
They were telling the truth.
Or they're leading us into a trap. A really obvious trap. We'd need an army to march in there right now.
I've got a better idea. Outrider, this is Central. Go.
I do not want to reveal any more information than necessary, for there can be imposters on the internet.
Hey there, I'm Frankie B. The last 3 videos chewed up my evenings and weekends for around 3 months, so I'm turning back to simpler things. Hot dog, beans, pan, stove, done. Keeps me in the habit while also allowing me to pretend to lead a life.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, and dudes of all teenagers.
These guys make up the bulk of the Advent forces we've dealt with.
Ensloppification. It's a term that's been popularized with the proliferation of AI slop, but it's really eclipsed the original term, and shitification, the notion that everything seems to be getting materially worse no matter where you look. Some of the feedback for Veil Trail asked the question, how do these 2 games represent a coming crisis if gaming has been going downhill for like over a decade already? Consider this video a bit of a follow-up and clarification. The coming crisis is that the next-in-line replacements are largely incompetent and the usual pipeline which fed talent into the gaming industry has been grossly disrupted. The existing trouble is that games are releasing as half-finished messes with atrocious writing, half-baked systems, game-breaking bugs, god-awful art direction, and a complete lack of passion or enthusiasm coming out of devs that hate their fans. Almost everyone agrees that some kind of problem exists in the industry, but because we are an algorithmically bifurcated society, there are also stark disagreements on the exact nature of whatever that problem is, as well as its root causes. I find that partisan explanations, almost without exception, are 2 things. They are in some small way true, and they are also a self-serving distraction from whatever the actual issue is. Chances are, if you spot something really obvious that it seems like both sides of the culture war are pointedly overlooking, you found yourself the answer.
Follow me.
One line of reasoning is that games are going downhill because of corporate greed. The nugget of truth here is pretty obvious. C-suite compensation is ridiculous, and there's no shortage of games that have been made purely because they would be good vehicles for microtransactions. And yet, why would any of that matter if devs are paid more than they have been relative to other points in history? If they have better work-life balance than they did at any time prior, if there's more of them and more resources for them? A line of reasoning from the other side is that games are going downhill because of a globalist cabal's nefarious schemes, with the writing output of games like Veilguard, Forspoken, the Saints Row reboot, all standing as pretty obvious testament to the fact that something coordinated was going on. Yet everything about Sweet Baby et al. Can be explained by looking up the word racket, and it doesn't quite explain why games untouched by the woke mind virus are also massively declining in quality. DEI programs hardly explain this because, if anything, the people being promoted and hired today are far more accredited candidates on the whole than were their 90s and thousands counterparts, many of whom were just people that wandered into the industry. It's not unlike film in the 70s and the 80s. So, what do I think the problem is? I think it's derived from a little mantra that I'm sure you've heard.
The customer is always right.
Shame on you. You're an bullies. Shame on you. Damn fucking bastard!
Well, what happens when the customer not only doesn't care how the sausage is made, but doesn't care what's inside of it? What happens when, after you reveal that you've been stuffing sausages full of doo-doo feces, the customer comes back and demands even more? What do you do when your customer complains about being served shit and yet continues to consume it just as long as you keep putting it on their plate? If it's what the customer wants, it's what the customer gets.
You 2 obviously want to suck what a real man has, so get down on your knees and suck every last drop of my cum until my dick is drained, now!
But who are these customers? Well, most numerous have to be the casuals, people who buy a few games a year, maybe, ranging from genuinely just 1 to maybe something every other month or so. When I itemize my expenditures, I've spent $110 this year, and that's exactly the problem with casuals. We don't tend to spend that much. We tend to buy stuff when it goes on sale. We tend to get a lot of mileage out of what we buy. And it's really hard to get casuals to spend more. Why would I care about a $10 price hike when I don't buy games on release? Why would I buy cosmetic microtransactions when I don't care about what strangers on the internet think of me? Why would I pre-order a collector's edition if I have a 3-digit IQ? The industry is not really contorted around casuals. We are too disparate and our spending is too unpredictable. But if you want something reliable, well, why not the annual audience? The Call of Duty and Battlefield gamers, the people who buy 2 or 3 games a year that interest them, maybe a few season passes here or there, and that's kind of all the more. They are really regular. And they also don't tend to really care if this year's release is worse than last year's, because they're still buying it. They always buy it. There are a lot of people like this. The trouble is that outside of the handful of games that they buy, well, they're not gonna be propping anything up. So sure, maybe the Battlefield audience is contributing to the Ensloppification of Battlefield, but that's not contorting an entire industry. Maybe in the late 2000s, when everyone wanted the Call of Duty audience, you could make a case, but we're long past that point, and publishers now understand that this audience is just not scalable. But then what about the whales? At first glance, it might seem like this is the bullseye. These are people who latch onto a game and they spend thousands upon thousands in microtransactions for it. But if you really think about it, that's not so different from annual gamers. Whales pick one game and they throw their money at it. They don't tend to whale for several games. And while I'm sure some of them are Saudi royals or people with more money than sense,
Very cool!
the vast majority of whales are just junkies and addicts. They take out credit cards, max them out in a frenzy, and then either conquer their addiction or destroy themselves. A whale might spend thousands on your game in one quarter, only to never spend another dime on it.
How about some soy food?
There's not very many whales, and they are simply not a reliable enough source of income that would make an entire industry bend around them. That brings me to the final group, the one that I do point the finger at. To preface this group, how annoyed are you by the fact that new games are $70 USD instead of $60? I mean, look, no one likes paying more for anything, but seriously, if you buy 3 full-priced games a year, we're talking about an extra $30. And that's just not the hardest thing in the world to budget for. That's why I've always found the tone and tenor of the outrage against these price hikes to be really, really confusing. It's just not going to be a lot of money for most people. And for people like me, it's literally no money because I wait until things go on sale. Seriously, games aren't staples. They're not things that you need to survive. They're entertainment.
Diablo 4 came out, I had to buy it. Final Fantasy 16 came out, I had to buy it. Tears of the Kingdom came out, I had to buy it.
Ignore me at your peril. I am here as a watchman to warn you.
The cleanse has begun.
God damn it!
But then, let's change the way we look at it. Let's say that you buy 3 games a month. Now we're talking about an extra $360 a year, which is a bit over 5 games before tax. That is a much more considerable sum, and that's our answer. Consumption addicts are the problem.
I'm a little loaded down. Hold on while I drop something.
It is not at all unreasonable to believe that a lot of people are buying that many full-price games a month. And here's how they do it. They take out a credit card, they put those games on the card, and they make the minimum payment. They're convinced that, as long as they're able to afford that minimum, they are living well within their means. For reference, the average individual's credit card debt in the United States is $6,500. The cost of 36 full-priced games in a year, that's only $2,520 plus tax, which means that you have almost $4,000 to go before you arrive at the average. And unlike whales, who tend to crash out and destroy themselves really quickly, consumption addicts are slow burns. Instead of spending a few $1,000s in a night or two, you have a pretty steady amount going out monthly, which makes it a lot easier to cook up excuses for your bad debt-growing habit.
Here we go, watch this.
Oh, fuck me.
And if you're wondering who has the time to play that many games, well, certainly not most of the people who buy like this. Do you think hoarders use everything that they have laying around their den? Now here's what should be obvious. People who barely play these games don't really care if the games themselves are awful. They're not buying them to enjoy a good game, they're buying them to have a sense of self. They don't care if they've bought a trash game just so long as someone afterwards tells them that actually they made a great purchase. Ever wondered why the gaming press still exists? The press is there to assign arbitrarily high numbers to whatever popular game releases to convince people that their impulse purchase was actually a mark of good taste.
I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
Important tangent. Narcissism doesn't necessarily mean that someone is bristling with self-confidence or even self-importance. It just means that they are self-obsessed. And narcissists depend on what's known as narcissistic supply, which is a fancy way of saying validation. When this validation is not supplied or it's otherwise spurned, they get awfully, awfully angry. To consumption addicts, the games they purchase are narcissistic fetishes. They become items of intense fixation through which validation is channeled. You say that you like a game. Other people say that they like it too, and thus you are validated. Sooner or later, people stop talking about the game because they've been shepherded by marketing and the press onto the next one, and the fetish loses its magic and is discarded in favor of a new one. This explains why 1 month you couldn't go a day without seeing Mauschly shoved fucking everywhere, and then a month later, everyone forgot that joke even existed, forgot that game even released.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
Wait a minute, this guy's not dying.
Never mind games as art. This is games as fashion, which brings me to an important point. The gaming industry is not the only one out there to have cultivated and exploited these behaviors. The fashion industry is a really obvious counterpart.
We're creating product that people don't need by stimulating demand and creating this sense that if you don't buy it now, it's not going to be available. There's this race to the bottom on price and quality that is an unsustainable model.
Remember this whole Ed, Edd n Eddy episode about trends?
Hey everyone, new fad!
Blow something up!
There's a ton of money to be made in cultivating a crop of self-obsessed neurotics who are dependent on your products to feel a sense of identity and belonging. We really need to stop pretending that every corpo is stupid and can't see 2 feet in front of themselves. Sure, there are dummies who dump capital into things like Concord or Veilguard or Bloodlines 2 long after it's clear that those projects should have been canned, but there are many more people who are pushing to rush as much product out to market as possible who duly recognize that it genuinely does not matter how unfinished and unimpressive and uninteresting the things are, just so long as when you release them you remember to spend a whole lot on marketing hype.
Did you get this at a Goodwill?
The reason that companies are doing this, are trying to make as much money as possible by churning out as many awful games as they can, is that they are hedging. They know that we're in a recession and that it's going to get worse. That's going to cause lines of credit to start drying up, and that's what the consumption addicts are dependent on. The companies recognize that they're in a rat race.
Now look, let's be sensible about this thing. There's money in this for all of us, right? There's enough for you, there's enough for you, and for me, and for you, and there's enough for me.
And they're squeezing every last penny out of the generations that have been raised to be as neurotic, as financially irresponsible, and as dependent on external validation as possible. To lay my bias clear, I think Jonathan Haidt's The Anxious Generation is a must-read. I'm oversimplifying, but a huge gist of the book is that a generation of parents, themselves obsessed with maximizing their own leisure time, became so restrictive and controlling of their children's real-world lives that they effectively eradicated unsupervised socialization at the same exact time that they allowed their kids free rein to do anything and everything that they wanted to online. So instead of driving their kids around to events or to friends' houses, instead of trusting them to lead their own lives, these parents pressed their kids into basically just playing video games all day.
I can't believe you can do that. Comes from sitting on my butt all day playing video games, that's why. Got it. Let's get out of here. Let's hit the bridge.
This happened at the same time that basically all socialization started to become algorithmically filtered. Human behavior and social trends are wildly complicated. They do not sort neatly into convenient buckets, but if you wanted your shit to go viral on Tumblr or Twitter, you had to attach a bunch of tags to it. You had to define yourself through labels, and that's all that you are, after all, a string of adjectives. And so, as you know that all X love Y, if you are X, you love Y. That worldview, that mindset, is ripe for exploitation, and that's why it was inoculated among lots of young people who didn't know any better. Because if all you do is sit around and play video games, what even is your identity? There's this crushing social pressure to define yourself as quickly as possible, best encapsulated in an obscure Australian band's 2001 single.
Right way on your consciousness throughout your eternal life. Did an awesome fucking job.
So you've got these kids who've been shielded from having meaningful life experiences, and they're hitting adulthood without any real sense of identity. So what's the quickest, easiest route towards identity and community? Well, it's from buying products. Nothing could be quicker. You buy a band shirt and you're a metalhead. You buy a Trump hat that was made in China and you're a patriot. You buy a Free Palestine shirt that was made in a sweatshop and you're a humanitarian. It never fills the void. People who try to purchase their identity are doing everything they can to avoid actually developing an authentic personality. And they're just running from shortcut to shortcut to shortcut. Companies know this, they know people do this, and so they keep making new shortcuts. Yeah, these new ones don't work either, but I'm sure that the next batch will. Eventually, though, this habit burns itself out. These people, these validation addicts, run out of money to fuel their spending addiction. And then, when it all falls apart, what's left? Broken people.
Cock-a-dookie bullshit, mumblefuck nonsense.
See? We coexist.
Okay, after having edited all of that together, I think it's a bit over the place, so maybe a capstone summary would be helpful to make sense of my insane mind. Late millennials, Zoomers, and Alpha all get raised by this new parenting philosophy which sees their unsupervised playtime and exposure to the real world get absolutely shredded at the same time that they're allowed to do whatever they want online. For late Zoomers, and especially for Generation Alpha, the raised by a screen phenomenon is a stark example of this, and obviously it's not everybody in these generations, but it's a pretty big chunk. Socializing primarily through the medium of social media itself amplifies the effects of this upbringing, which leads to two pretty obvious trends. The first one is an obsession with identity as filtered through concepts, which is to say, defining yourself by tags that you can throw into your bio. The second trend is that these people view narcissistic gratification as the primary purpose of socializing.
Complete nonsense. He didn't fucking touch me.
Which is to say, whenever you interface with social media, you're socializing through the means of a portal. You're performing in a way to an audience that is comprised of people all on their own individual stages. Even if your avatar is just yourself, there's this level of disjointment which, along with all of the tools at your disposal that allow you to curate the experience that you are algorithmically provided, taken together, it all serves to create a social experience which is entirely bent around you. It's kind of hard to nail this idea down. It's sort of like a solipsistic socialization. It makes you think that socializing is there just to somehow reinforce and validate yourself. These are the building blocks, the fundamentals of consumption addicts. For these people, all facets of life are just fast fashion, which is cycled through in order to chase validation. That validation is vapid, and it never leads to self-actualization, especially since social media is a masquerade in which people present falsely idyllic lives. These people sense that there is a void inside of themselves, and they get locked into this cycle of constantly searching for shortcuts to catch up.
Catch up. I love ketchup so much.
And it's really easy to see how they're exploited for financial gain. When these people join political movements, they don't tend to meaningfully engage in local politics, they don't tend to read political theory or philosophy, they really don't even tend to practice what they preach, they just descend into petty purity rituals and try to bounce around to whatever position is trendy,
I don't mind.
only to leave it in the dust when it's no longer in vogue. Remember how big of a deal Black Lives Matter was? Well, the fundamental problems that movement cared about, they haven't gone away. They haven't been resolved. Certainly not if we look at the statistics, but by around mid-21, you no longer got any attention for saying it, and so it just completely dropped off the face of the earth. Like, nobody says that phrase anymore, that acronym. I guess everyone threw out all of their yard signs. And from the flip side, there's no shortage of grifters.
Oh, bitte, mein Herr, won't you buy mine shitty overcasted Kaffee so help save the West? If you don't buy mine shitty coffee, then the liberals will win and they will force me to sell mine expensive collection of children's remote control autos.
I'm on the record as having a juicy poop problem.
What the fuck just happened?
And when these people, these raised from birth consumers, start inventing mental disorders for themselves, inventing sexualities, inventing genders, they're attempting molecular fission on wonder-bred existences. It's modern alchemy to turn nothing special into something special without actually doing anything. There's a huge market here for selling shit like pins and shirts and plushies and flags and books and adult diapers.
Yeah, certainly come all right. At least it smells like it.
But those are indirect forms of monetization. You're selling products around an idea, a concept, a movement, a subculture. Fandoms are where the real money is. Fandoms emerge around products. Consuming the product or pretending to is the shortcut to identity, belonging, purpose. And the more auxiliary products you consume, merch, microtransactions, the more resonantly you feel yourself connecting to that higher meaning. And then a new hotness comes out, and, well, it's on to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. That's why we've seen the gaming industry contort so badly around consumption addicts. These companies are selling meaning and identity to people.
The one who walks alone is likely to find themselves in places.
Yeah, it expires in a month or two, and it never actually fills the void, so it's very similar to a drug addiction, and it's just as profitable for the dealer. This is why I don't think that the ensloppification of gaming is a problem you fix with government regulation.
Nanomachine, son!
Corpos aren't stupid. They'll find some way to be compliant, to sneak around it, to keep supplying that demand.
Go back to where you came from!
You can't pass a law that stops these people bereft of personality from taking on debt in order to purchase 3+ games a month so that they can have friends. All of this stuff, the way that people have grown and the twisted roots that they've come from, these are cultural issues, and despite many attempts to do so, you cannot really regulate, you cannot really control culture. It's up to all of us, the people, as individuals, to bring about a sea change. And, I will say, perhaps the most satisfying part of doing that is the opportunity to make fun of endless millions of consumption-addicted man-children.
Make a break for the helicopter. It's in the junkyard.
All XCOM operatives are secure. Firebrand is returning to base.
Everything by the numbers. Mission accomplished.
Well, let's start by blowing up all of your friends.
Oh my god!
Alright, addendum here. I'm going to be taking it easy on the editing, but don't worry, I'll keep some XCOM footage in the corner for the brain-rotted among us. I think the spark for this video's idea was that survey that came out like a month or two ago about people buying 2 or fewer games each year. Research that was performed by Circana, posted by this guy on Bluesky, and then span out of literal hundreds of games journalism outlets using LLMs to do their very, very strenuous and important work for them. So let me try to figure out how to make sense of these graphs. I'm splitting hairs here because hyper-enthusiast, price-insensitive players is a polite, nice, analytical way of saying consumption-addicted validation junkies. In that regard, I think we agree. I just think that there's a lot more of them than this chart suggests, way more than 4% of people who play games. And then I scrolled down a little bit on the Bluesky thread, and yes, he's counting mobile gamers. So this chart was self-reported consumption in a survey by consumers. It specified that new game meant not secondhand or used, which makes complete sense since these analytics are for people in the industry, not for fat weirdos like me. The sample size of the survey was 2,500. It was conducted over half a month, and it included everyone above the age of 13. That gives such a clearer idea of what this chart is actually saying. And it aligns pretty closely with this report that they launched last year, 2024, on a similar topic, which points in a similar direction. If the majority of gamers are 45 plus and female, yeah, I think we're counting mobile games and Facebook games in this evaluation. Down here is the interesting one, that 16% of US gamers are super gamers. This is much more in line with what I was expecting than the whole 4% idea, and chewing on this being like around 38.3 million people, you can see how quickly the money stacks up. But wait, there's more, because Matt released more really good data. You can tell it's really good right here, because it supports my preconceptions of the world. Game content spending grew by 1% in October year on year. Stop and think about that, and that is insane. That's crazy. That really is nuts. This year, we've had tariffs, a price hike on AAA games, and if we subtract AI capex from our GDP growth, the reality is that we're at almost zero GDP growth. Consumer spending pretty much across the board reflects this. It's going down, down, down.
What?
Boy, do I hate my tendency to double-check things. It keeps giving me more and more work. So originally I had written that consumer spending data showed that people were spending less and saving more. No, that was a wishful assumption on my part. I think I might have stumbled into something here. Let's take a look at August's consumer spending numbers collected by the Bureau of Economic Analysis. So personal consumption expenditures are up. Disposable personal income, which in this case is just income minus tax, went up by only $86.1 billion. That still sounds like a lot, but it's kinda not. This number includes stocks, which explains quite a lot of the increase, and it also includes real estate. More important to me is that personal consumption expenditures are up to $129.2 billion. Right away, that means that there's a bigger increase in spending than in earning, a deficit, and that's going to be fueled either by eating into savings or, much more likely, by taking on debt. The rate of saving is about the same, if on a slight downtick, and that's kind of weird to me because historically people have saved going into recessions. Now, a lot of the increases in expenditure make sense if we take into account inflation. If there's something that you have to have, you spend more on it. But let's take a look at what people are actually buying. Number one, transportation services. Intuitively, you might be thinking, flights, cruises, public transportation fare, but this also includes car repair, car rentals, tolls, and most importantly, leases on vehicles. I'd say that this is a mostly essential category, so makes sense. But next up is food services and accommodations. This is a really big increase. This is not groceries. That falls under food and beverages here. This is restaurants and hotels. If you know that we're going into a recession, you don't need to go on holiday.
I had to buy it.
And you especially do not need to buy Grubhub.
I had to buy it.
Third, recreational goods and vehicles. This is toys and media, which includes games, that kind of thing. Why is this going up in a recession? These are all luxury goods. You don't need them to survive.
I had to buy it.
Continuing down the line, financial services are partially pretty essential things and partially stocks and investments, which they're not really luxury. But then, after that, we've got recreational services, and they're way up. Look, a gym membership, that's a great buy, but this includes gambling. You don't need to gamble in a recession.
Until I gambled it on crypto. And I want to point out, this is not me bragging. This is not me saying I'm going to flex my wealth. But I put my money in the crypto market in the wrong section, and I pretty much lost most of everything.
I had to buy it.
After those, the expenditures are mostly on essential goods and services. But 3 of the top 5 largest increases are on non-essentials, on luxury. And there's a deficit here too, which means that most of this is going to be done by taking on debt. It's like a 50% earnings to debt ratio, man. So, maybe the topic of this video applies to a whole lot more than just games. Maybe this is the root of all ensloppification everywhere. Maybe the reason that everything is getting materially worse is that we, as consumers, fundamentally do not understand the value of money anymore, and we think that the existence of credit means that, hey, if we want something, we buy it. And I'm fully aware of the whole K-shaped recovery thing, where kind of like the working class is getting worse off and people who have more money are recovering. But you don't get these kind of numbers when it's only the yuppie-duppies spending. I just cannot help but to think that people are buying a bunch of junk. They don't care if they're buying junk because they figure, I'll just buy more. I mean, think about that in games. The people who paid full price for the newest Call of Duty, the one with all the AI art, well, if that's not satisfying to them, they'll just buy another FPS to play. My parents didn't behave that way with money. My grandparents didn't behave that way with money. This is a really new phenomenon. Holy shit, looking at this stuff, I actually think we're way more cooked than I thought we were before. So, back to the script I wrote before.
I'm so wasted.
Time to put on the beer goggles.
I also think that game companies are targeting these consumption addicts more directly, which is prompting them to spend more to make up for the fact that normal consumers are buying less. When the people who are taking on all of this credit in order to buy FOMO games finally run out of luck, the debt that they owe to these banks is going to become toxic. But that's a problem for the bank. The video game companies already got their money, so there's a huge incentive for game developers to keep churning out slop, right up until there's a big crash, which is almost certainly going to be the AI, bubble bursting.
Give me the GPUs! Give me the GPUs! Give me the GPUs! Give me the GPUs!
Major spoilers.
Excellent work, Commander.
For me, the big question comes after we hit the nadir of this market correction. Are game developers going to try this shit again? When I say I think this credit crunch is going to wipe out those consumption addicts, I really, really mean it. Nevertheless, developers might try once again to ring the dinner bell to bring all their pay piggies to the trough. I'm really worried that this strategy will work again, and all the pay piggies will come right back with their shiny new high-interest Bank of America credit cards and buy and buy and buy and buy. If that does wind up happening, then the entire opportunity afforded by that fresh, new business cycle we'll enter after this recession, well, it'll have been wasted, and we'll need to wait for another crash to the gaming industry before we have any real hope of renaissance.
What's this building up to? Oh, you'll see when we get there. I am so sick of this place!
Status confirmed. Mission accomplished.
They gave him a bat credit card?
I think I'm going to keep postscripts to these simpler videos since I like letting the bigger involved ones sort of exist as their own thing. So, Tale of Vale and Trail blew up, and I'm immensely happy about that. My 2-year goal was going to be 250 subs and to get a single video up to maybe 5,000, and having greatly exceeded that goal already, I'm now primed and prepared to phone it in for a year. I think for the rest of this year, I'm going to mostly be putting out like little idle thought essays like this one, while working on the next involved effort, which is going to be a glance at how Mass Effect 1 and Baldur's Gate 3 are both, they're good games, but they inspired bad trends, looking at them as these generation-defining RPGs. The hope is to get the video itself done in January, and then after that to set the stage for what to expect in 2026. I guess I'm gonna make a Twitter and attempt to be semi-active on there, although my personal philosophy remains the less social media that you use, the better. I'll link to it in comments or something, but I really would not expect very much of it. Thanks for watching, and see you around. As ever, if you want to kick up a loquacious conversation or an embarrassing slap fight in the comments, well hey, let's get some almonds activated.
The gun is good.
The gun is good!
The penis is evil.